if you're one of our haters who are out there watching.
I want to warn people about hypnoporn.
I need to stay meta.
Like, what?
If Jim would shut up for a second.
Oh, high fidelity.
Okay, don't tell me to shut up.
I'm not whining.
I eat doggies. I eat doggies. Feels like a party.
Stop that.
It's a war. They have made it so that I cannot be celebrating July 4th.
This is 6 Degrees of Stew. You don't need to stay meta, but I'm glad you're here. Hi, everybody. This is my second time trying to record this. The first time, it didn't pick up anything, and I had an hour done. So, back at it. Excuse me. I am doing a static recording because I have been very tired this week. And as a lot of you know, if you watched my talking about invisible illnesses and things like that, if you watched that stream, I'm getting used to some of my medicines and they're trying them up again. It's been about a month or two here with my doctors getting me back to the levels I was because I didn't have insurance for a year. So kind of getting used to them. And I just get really tired sometimes too on top of that. And I love interacting with people on live streams, but sometimes that can also make a stream go on for a long time. And I've been trying to get this government cheese one out, which was called, the title of this will be Beyond the Block, the Untold Story of Government Cheese. And we're also going to talk about the Got Milk campaign and how that the government cheese leads to also the Got Milk campaign. And also, I probably should have been making this, kind of general statement or introduction every time that I've done a live, but everybody's been really great. Or even when I do recordings, but just in general so that people do know I can't say enough about the chatters I have, but I have a lot of new viewers and followers that I have. So I just want a reminder to everybody that this is an all-inclusive space. Everybody's generally been really kind. I have no complaints about that. So no racism, xenophobia, anti-LGBTQIA plus commentary, any forms of discrimination. It's just not tolerated here. So, keep being respectful that, as everyone has been, no arguing, keep help, everybody's, just keep the chat positive that it has been. And if you're new or you're a little shy, please, you're welcome. Come in and say hi, introduce yourself, hang out, when we do go live, enjoy the streams. It's, always welcome. The more chatters, the more fun a live stream can be. Same as in the comments. I welcome those too. I love reading comments and responding to anybody that's, comes in after a stream's done or whatever. I'm going to put my link tree down to in the sources that I always put out all afterwards too, so to follow me. I have TikTok, Instagram. I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, various other places you can find me too. My podcast too on Spotify or wherever else you listen. So just kind of taking care of that. Oh, sorry, my allergies are really bad today too. And I ran out of my nasal spray. My Gentle Mist stuff, Flonase. So let's start here. A little bit of research I have, and then we'll watch a few short videos and we'll talk about those. And I'll have all the sourcing, like I said, afterwards when this is done and I upload it. So government cheese is a processed cheese product stockpiled and distributed by the U.S. government as part of agricultural subsidy programs and food assistance initiatives. It originated as a solution to dairy surpluses caused by federal market interventions from the mid-20th century onward, especially during the 1970s and 1980s, while often associated with block cheese distributed to welfare recipients in the 1980s. Government cheese remains an integral part of U.S. food security and dairy market regulation today. The origins and causes of surplus. The roots of government cheese lie in the Federal Dairy Price Support System, authorized by the Agricultural Act of 1949, which empowered the Commodity Credit Corporation to purchase surplus dairy products to stabilize prices. Fast forward to the 1970s. Inflation soared, energy crises disrupted food prices, and dairy shortages briefly emerged. To counteract rising dairy costs and incentivize production, President Jimmy Carter's administration, starting in 1977, injected about $2 billion over 4 years into dairy subsidies. The policy guaranteed minimum milk prices and government purchase of excess dairy, which encouraged farmers, especially those recovering from previous struggles, to increase production aggressively. However, the guaranteed buyback and support prices led to a market imbalance where supply far outpaced demand. Excess milk was converted into storable products like butter, powdered milk, and particularly processed cheese for its long shelf life. By the early 1980s, the government's cheese stockpile had ballooned to over 500 million pounds, with the total dairy product surplus costing taxpayers billions and creating logistical headaches. Stockpiling and storage solutions. The government faced surpluses that simply could not be sold quickly at profitable prices without disrupting markets. To solve the storage challenge, hundreds of thousands of pounds of cheese were stored in refrigerated limestone mines and caves, particularly in Missouri near Springfield, where the natural cool environment maintained the cheese's integrity. One moment while I get a sip of my Diet Pepsi. These cheese caves stored cheese at about 36 degrees Fahrenheit, creating vast warehouses underground that preserved millions of pounds for years. The stockpiling became so extensive, reaching historic peaks near 1.4 billion pounds of cheese, so much cheese, that these caves gained cultural notoriety and became synonymous with government excess. The government's plan was to hold cheese until market prices recovered. But as surpluses persisted, cost of storage and deterioration mounted, pressuring subsequent administrations to seek other solutions. Public awareness and distribution in the 1980s. By the 1980s, government cheese became publicly well known as the Reagan administration grappled with growing surpluses amid rising public concern over poverty and welfare. Reagan authorized the Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program in 1981 to distribute cheese directly to low-income citizens, welfare recipients, the elderly, and food banks. Cheese was distributed in large 5-pound blocks, often considered low quality due to its processed nature and packaging. Nonprofits such as the Salvation Army, Catholic Community Services, churches, and veterans organizations managed much of the local distribution. The effort was intended to reduce waste and provide nutritional aid during economic downturns, but was also met with criticism over its scale, pace, and the cheese's taste and texture. Many critics claimed the program was a symbolic gesture insufficient to address the magnitude of the surplus or the needs of impoverished Americans. The distribution was bureaucratically complex and sometimes stigmatized recipients, creating a complex legacy for government cheese as both nutritional support and social symbol. Reagan administration actions. The Reagan administration faced the dual challenges of reducing costly cheese stockpiles while shrinking government spending on welfare programs. In addition to direct distributions, it revised dairy price supports to reduce the incentives for overproduction, slowing milk prices increases and decreasing subsidies. Reagan signed the Agricultural and Food Act of 1981, eliminating the old formula for price supports and establishing a more gradual increase in minimum prices. These changes, combined with large sales and giveaways, started to reduce new stockpile growth, but did not fully resolve the surplus issue for years. The administration's approach balanced agricultural market reforms with awareness of social welfare needs, yet critics argued it did not go far enough to prevent structural dairy overproduction or adequately support vulnerable populations. The current status of cheese stockpiles. Though the dramatic block cheese giveaways ended decades ago, government cheese's legacy persists in today's dairy market and food assistance programs. As of 2025, about 1.4 billion pounds of cheese remains in cold storage, stored mostly in the same Missouri caves and refrigerated warehouses. Unlike the surplus era, the vast majority of cheese is owned by private dairy industry entities, such as Kraft Heinz, Dairy Farmers of America, PepsiCo, and Nestle, which lease storage space to maintain inventory and manage supply in a fluctuating market. The USDA continues to purchase cheese regularly as part of emergency food programs and to provide farms income support. Cheese remains a staple in programs like TEFAP and the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which provide nutritional aid to food banks, senior centers, and low-income families. Contemporary distribution programs. Government cheese distribution today is less a widespread giveaway and more a structured food assistance strategy. The USDA procures cheddar, pepper jack, and other cheeses for delivery to nonprofit food distribution networks, schools, and senior programs. These efforts support food security while balancing dairy market supply and demand. The goal is to provide high-quality nutrition to needy populations without stigmatization, using partnerships with established nonprofits and state agencies. Though government cheese of the famous 1980s style is largely a cultural memory, its functional successor plays an important role in contemporary food aid and agricultural policy. So those are my beginning notes, and we will move on now to this first video I have, and it is from CNBC. That's Hunter. Everybody knows him from my live streams, and if you've seen me on other panels, he likes to be very talkative when I do stuff. Let me share this. This first video is from CNBC, and it's how government cheese became welfare for farmers. Let me share the screen here. Make sure the captions are on. Okay, it's big. Volume's up. Perfect. There we go.
You probably won't find it in anyone's fridge today, but you might still catch glimpses of it in pop culture. It made its way into iconic stand-up sets and SNL sketches.
You're gonna end up eating a steady diet of government cheese.
Gotta miss
It's
Chris
become
Farley.
a signifier of urban poverty for artists from New York,
After that government cheese, we eating steak.
Philadelphia, and Compton.
What else is a thug to do when you eat cheese from the government?
But the epicenter of government cheese actually rested in Kansas City, Missouri. The modest city stored $4 billion worth of government cheese in caves and shipped millions of pounds of it all across the country.
When I was a kid and we used to get it, it would come in these big brick type blocks, and it's like day glow orange. You can't mistake it.
In the mid-'80s, at the height of the government cheese phenomenon,
We used to get ours at the Young Gentlemen's Club. It is now closed in our area. And I remember standing in the long lines outside to get it. And I believe, now this is from a child's memory. My dad was a construction worker for the mines. So when they were closed, he was, it was constantly the mines opening, closing, opening, closing. But I remember you would get cheese. I want to say dried beans. It seems like eggs were involved for some reason. And then the powdered milk. And man, it did not taste good. I remember my mom making it, but you did what you had to do, right?
there were
I have fond
roughly
memories of the cheese, though.
1.2 billion pounds of surplus cheese in the U.S. That's a lot of cheese, but we actually have more today than we did in 1984. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Sorry, still don't pay for YouTube.
Check engine or ABS light on? Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
The story of government cheese can be traced back to the same roots as food assistance programs like SNAP today, not in humanitarianism, but in agriculture. In the case of government cheese, it all boiled down to milk prices.
People talk about food assistance programs as if they were created to help poor people out. And, yes, that's true, but almost all of the major food assistance programs were ideas that came from agriculture because we had too much of something.
So, what happened to government cheese, and could it make a comeback? To understand how we got to the point where Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg are talking about it,
Where do you buy government cheese? You don't buy it. You got to be on a special mailing list.
let's go back to the very start of American cheese in the 1850s. In 1851, Jesse Williams opened the first American cheese factory in Rome, New York. In 1903, James L. Kraft moved from Canada to the US and began selling cheese out of a wagon in Chicago. A few years later, he formed Kraft & Brothers, and in 1916, he filed his first patent for the process to create what we now know as American cheese.
I have discovered that cheese of the cheddar genus may be prevented from disintegrating under the action of heat.
And that cheese used up a lot of milk. Cue the dairy farmers.
Rural America represented over half of the population, and farmers represented over half of rural America. So there was a real sense that if you were helping out farmers, you were helping out just a whole lot of citizens.
The Great Depression rocked the milk market, and the government stepped in to help control prices. The USDA used a pricing index called the parity price formula. Basically, if the price of milk dipped below what it cost to produce it, the government would help cover the difference. And that provided farmers with a peace of mind that their business wouldn't tank because of something like an economic depression or a war. In 1949, Congress passed the Agricultural Act, establishing a formal price support system for farmers. And it's not just for cheese. The government tries to keep a stable supply of agricultural commodities, like wheat, corn, and dairy. One way to do that is by buying up extra product.
That Depression-era logic really just kind of continued up until about the 1980s. There was always some event that occurred that made you glad you had this program in place.
By the end of the 70s, milk prices were all out of whack. In 1977, President Carter's administration enacted a new subsidy that injected $2 billion into the dairy market over the next 4 years. Suddenly, it was very profitable to produce milk. So, farmers produced a lot of it. So much milk, there was nowhere to store it all before it spoiled. It was turned into butter, powdered milk, and cheese. And the government bought it up. Tons of it, literally. The government had so much excess dairy, they didn't know what to do with it.
A lot of times when people talked about this, they talked about the government buying dairy products as if some guy was going down to the local Kroger's and picking up a cartful. But in fact, what they did is they simply put out an announcement. We will buy these products at these prices. Anybody interested, let us know.
In the mid-70s, early 80s, they had so much product, what they could do with it. So non-fat dry milk, they would go on the international market donation to underdeveloped countries as a food for peace program.
In December 1981, President Reagan, who earlier that year had pledged to scale back the food stamp program, caved and said the U.S. would distribute 30 million pounds of extra cheese to those in need.
With non-fat dry milk.
I have this article here, and the reason Reagan caved, give me 1 second, I put it at the spot. Okay. This is from a history article, and they pull quotes from the Washington Post in 1981. The huge supply was a problem, but there was another catch. The government had no idea what to do with all that cheese. Quote, probably the cheapest and most practical thing to do would be to dump it in the ocean, a USDA official told the Washington Post in 1981. There was also confusion as to how long the processed American cheese, designed to be stored for long periods of time, really lasted. As officials scrambled behind the scenes to figure out how to deal with the cheesy conundrum became public when Agricultural Secretary John R. Block showed up at a White House event with a 5-pound block of greening moldy cheese and showed it to the press. We've got 60 million of these that the government owns, he said. It's moldy, it's deteriorating. We can't find a market for it. We can't sell it, and we're looking to try to give some of it away. As the public got wind of the existence of all that surplus cheese, it began to sharply criticize President Ronald Reagan. He had been elected in part by bandying about inaccurate stereotypes of, quote, welfare queens and poor people who gamed the system, and earlier in 1981 had pledged to reduce the federal food stamp program. There were hungry Americans still suffering from the after effects of the recession. Why not give them the cheese? In December 1981, Reagan relented. Quote, at a time when American families are under increasing financial pressure, their government cannot sit by and watch millions of pounds of food turn to waste, he said in a public address. As a result, he'd free 30 million pounds of cheese from the country's stockpile. He created the Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program, which began handing out the blocks of processed cheese to the elderly, low-income people, and organizations that serve them. So not quite like he did it out of the goodness of his cold, black heart.
You can send that overseas, and there's almost an unlimited potential to feed hungry people if you open it up to the world. Cheese has almost no feasible option to go overseas. And so you
The
have
press
to do
got wind of it. That's
Cheese
why.
is typically stored in bulk in 45-pound boxes.
They would have
or
happily dumped it in the
500-pound
ocean.
barrels. But giving out whiskey barrel-sized cheese just isn't practical. So manufacturers started processing it in smaller portions. And from the warehouses of Kansas City and other stockpiles across the country, boxes upon boxes of processed cheese were packaged up into 5-pound blocks, shipped across America, and government cheese was born. By 1984, the U.S. was storing roughly 5 pounds of cheese for every American.
It got to the point where agencies would be going to like senior citizen centers with baskets of 2-pound loaves of processed cheese and just handing them out.
The Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program sent the cheese to food pantries, school lunch programs, and other organizations that could distribute the bricks of yellowy orange dairy substance.
It has a distinctive taste, which people have described as like kind of a cheddar cheese whiz type of thing. And it seems like people either loved it or hated it. You know, there is no middle ground.
Something that started out with economic intentions had social and political consequences.
It was a staple of your childhood. So there is a nostalgia about that, similar to how a lot of people would feel about, you know, breakfast cereal or peanut butter and jelly. But at the same time, it's yet another aspect of life as a poor person that you had no control over.
Yep.
So you got it whether you wanted it or not, and you had no choice if you liked it or not.
This block
It's very reminiscent. I'm just thinking now of maybe people remember the black and white aisle of chips and different items at the grocery store. I remember that aisle, and that's where if we got snacks, we would get snacks from. And I remember how excited I would be as a kid if we had a birthday party, because that was the one time we would get brand name chips. I don't know why, like if it was a special occasion, but then we would get brand name chips. All the other times, like if we would get treats or if it was in the budget, it was always the black and white stuff, just potato chips, just pretzels, but it was that whole black and white aisle, and it was before stores had their own brands and stuff, but it was the black and white aisle. That reminds me of my childhood. And still to this day, I prefer just nacho chips over Doritos. I'll get those instead of Doritos. I don't know, just sticks with me.
Dairy product became a neatly packaged symbol of economic status sitting in refrigerators across America. By the 90s, it wasn't profitable.
We
for
always
dairy
had
farmers to
Flavor Aid,
pump
not
out so much
Kool-Aid.
milk, and government cheese essentially disappeared. You might still catch a reference to it on menus like Wahlburgers, but today's American cheese probably isn't coming from Uncle Sam.
Taxes is feeling unwelcome.
Oh, Flavor Aid was not good either. We only got Kool-Aid on when my dad was really working and things were good. Flavor Aid's nasty. Not the same. It's not the same, folks. Oh, not yet. Still another commercial. Flavor Aid does not taste like Kool-Aid.
Dairy farmers are struggling with low prices again, but not because of an economic depression. Genetics, technology, and big farms have made milk production more efficient than ever before. And consumer preferences are changing. Liquid milk consumption is down, but cheese consumption is on the rise. And we have a lot of cheese. But Americans don't have the same desire for processed American cheese like they did in the 80s. Now, it's all about specialty artisan cheeses, which can turn a higher profit, but they aren't as easy to make in mass. So here we are. Dairy prices on edge, millions of Americans living with food insecurity, more than 1 billion pounds of extra cheese. Could government cheese be the answer?
Today we have 3% of the dairy farmers in the U.S. that produce 50% of the milk. Those larger dairy farmers are doing okay, so no, I don't think we'd go back to something like that.
The government actually did buy up 11 million pounds of surplus cheese back in 2016 and distributed it through welfare programs. Since 2016, the USDA has spent more than $47 million buying up 22 million pounds of U.S. surplus cheese.
There's also a culture of dependency argument of farmers getting too used to having the government step in and make surpluses go away. At some point, you start asking the question, are farmers making milk just so they can sell it to some government program?
Another place you may see that extra dairy pop up? School lunches. The Trump administration has been scaling back some nutrition regulations in school cafeterias, and that's good news for the dairy industry. 40% of milk consumption in the US comes from kids 2 to 17 years old. And with a higher sodium limit, school kitchens can incorporate more cheese into their plates. And there's certainly plenty to go around.
This notion of we're really good at making stuff and sometimes we make a little bit more than we know what to do with goes hand in hand with, oh, there's some people that really could use some help. So, you can argue that's a win-win, but the people who are really concerned about food assistance say, well, maybe these guys don't want cheese.
I thought they did a really good job with that. Okay. Now the next one has a little overlap, but it's really good. It's a little bit funnier. I really like it. But it talks a little bit more about Jimmy Carter and different stuff, and it's kind of funny. Hunter, no, buddy, no. Okay, let me share this tab here. You would think he's so neglected. Well, you guys know how much I neglect him. The most neglected dog on these YouTube streets. Okay.
The government manages a lot.
Pause. Okay, let's make this bigger. Okay, let me make sure the captions are on. Okay. There we go.
The government manages a lot of things. Air and water quality, roads and bridges, the tone of the national conversation. Also, once upon a time, a heckload of cheese.
I love that. So much cheese. My God, it's cheese!
It all started in 1976. Jimmy Carter was running for president, and he started floating this idea.
Although I am a farmer, I am not in favor of guaranteeing farmers a profit. I am in favor of giving farmers an equal break.
This wasn't just political pandering. There's an argument that our country has to be able to produce its own food, because relying on other countries for food, that's a national security risk. Now, this was a campaign promise that nobody really expected him to fulfill. But then he became president, and in 1977, he announced his plan to help farmers. And he wasn't alone. Congress wanted in.
Cheese fan.
We now go live to the Capitol. We also love the farmers.
And so they passed a law for dairy farmers, saying that they wanted the price of milk to go up automatically every 6 months. There are two ways to make that happen. You either lower the supply by telling milk producers to produce less milk, or increase the demand. Our government decided that increasing consumption was more American than agriculture quotas. So they started buying milk themselves.
Carter administration has announced a new program to increase the demand of milk. Milk prices are expected to rise as the demand.
Buckle up, Bessie.
Buckle up, Bessie.
But the thing about milk is it's kind of hard to stockpile and transport. You'd have to get all these huge tankers, and of course, it starts going bad the minute it's out of the cow. So they moved one step down the supply chain to dairy-based products, like cheese. The way this program worked is that the federal government says,
We will buy as much cheese, butter, or
Butter.
non-fat dry milk as you want to sell us at these prices.
the government buys more cheese, cheesemakers buy more milk, and the resulting demand pushes the price of milk up. The government is creating a price floor. And in order to do this, they have to be willing to buy all of the cheese that anybody wants to sell them at this price. And if you're a cheese seller and you hear this, you're like, well, I'm going to just sell them my worst cheese at that price. So to prevent this, the government said, look, if we're going to buy your cheese, first, you have to meet with Bob. Bob Ashabrock was a cheese grater. Cheese grater, like what a teacher does. Bob's job was to make sure that all of the cheese met USDA grade A cheddar standards.
Bob.
He spent
Meet
30
Bob.
years testing and tasting cheese for the United States government. He'd use his cheese trying equipment to look for the 17 flavor defects
What a job
that could
Bob
happen
had.
in
Just
cheddar
eating
cheese.
cheese for all these years.
Flat, bitter, yeasty, multi-acidic,
Sign
old
me
milk,
up.
fruity, metallic, sour, whey taint, weedy, onion, barney, lipase, and sulfate. It just goes on. Bob and his fellow cheese graters were on the road all the time, just eating cheese, and the government just kept buying and buying. Before long, every warehouse in Wisconsin was full. There was cheese in practically every cold storage in the United States. And the government needed an even bigger space to put it in, ideally one with its own temperature controls. So they began renting these caves in Kansas, 35 feet beneath the ground, the size of 120 football
120 football fields. That's
trainloads of
huge.
cheese started to show up. And when news gets out that the government is filling caves with cheese, the press goes nuts.
I'm Steve Inskeep. Cheese Spin is reporting that the latest chatter in cheddar is the cheese cave
I love
crisis.
puns.
Ron Elving has this report.
They crack me up.
Grind is off the government cheese program.
Eventually, Jimmy Carter left office, and Ronald Reagan was left to figure out what to do with all of this cheese. The government was buying 1 in every 4 pounds of the country's cheddar cheese.
Well, my God, Jimmy, it's all cheese.
And the clock
my
was
God,
ticking
Jimmy.
because all this cheese was starting to get moldy. So the government needed to find a market for the stuff, and fast.
Well, they have to be careful because of something called commercial displacement. If they just send a flood of cheese onto the market, they'll end up hurting the producers they're trying to help by providing a less expensive product to meet existing demand.
So the government had the cheddar reprocessed into new bricks and started giving it away at food banks. The idea was that these consumers probably weren't going to buy cheese anyway, so you're not necessarily hurting the market. And lo, a new pop culture icon was born.
Government cheese make the best grilled cheese you'd have never had in your life.
Where do you buy government cheese? You don't buy it. You have to be on. You got to be on their special mailing list. You got to be on the plan.
You're gonna end up eating a steady diet of government cheese
Looking at the pan down by the river.
The government cheese cave started to empty out. The guaranteed milk price, which had been going up automatically every 6 months, was eventually frozen. But that does not mean the government had fixed the problem. The thing about price controls is that once you start them, they are really, really hard to unwind. This is a basic supply and demand problem. The government was demanding an unnatural amount of milk, and so farmers were supplying an unnatural amount of milk. One part of the solution then was to gently get that milk supply down. So the government literally paid dairy farmers to stop producing milk. That did some good. And then on the other side, the government tried to replace some of their artificial demand for milk with new, real demand for milk, which led to things like
Got milk?
So this weird campaign promise had a hand in basically the 2 most important dairy moments in pop culture. And it served as an instant signifier of a government program gone fully off the rails.
Aww. Now, this is going to lead us into Got Milk. And I have the first commercial. If you're old enough, maybe if you're as old as me, maybe you'll remember. This is the original Got Milk commercial, which was done by Michael Bay. We're going to play it first. Let me pull it up. Here we go. Make sure it's showing. Okay, here we go.
And that was the Vienna Wood Dance in D, one of my all-time favorites. And now let's make that random call with today's $10,000 question. It's a tough one. Who shot Alexander Hamilton in that famous duel?
It is a funny commercial to this day.
Let's go to the phones and see who's out there.
Hello,
for $10,000. Who shot? Excuse me?
I'm
afraid your time is almost up. I'm sorry. Maybe next time.
Oh, Got Milk?
Got Milk.
The campaign started in California, and then DC took over some parts of it for a national campaign because I have a relative that worked for it because we had so much Got Milk merchandise back then. My sister actually still has her shirt. It's one of her favorites. It's blue and it has the white Got Milk. I don't have mine any longer, but yeah, it was a big campaign. Okay, so what was the problem with the Got Milk campaign? Let's show how that all took place. And I have something interesting about this too after we go through this.
If you've opened a magazine in the past 20 years, this is probably a familiar image. It's easy to flip past these ads and just think, hey, great. Stars promoting a healthy alternative to sugary sodas and sports drinks. Awesome. There's this idea that we have to drink milk in order to be healthy. But where did that idea come from? There are plenty of foods with just as much calcium, potassium, and protein.
Individuals can be very healthy with no dairy consumption at all.
In fact, a quarter of all Americans can't even digest milk. And researchers have found drinking lots of milk doesn't help protect against fractures.
Milk was a bad choice.
And yet, the federal dietary guidelines recommend 3 servings of dairy a day. But why?
Our dairy industry has become a very powerful economic force.
For most of human history, milk was a very small part of the lives of a very small number of people.
Milk was really a survival technology for living in cold places. Long winters made it difficult to grow fruits and vegetables.
Around World War I, the U.S. government sent huge amounts of canned and powdered milk overseas to fight malnutrition among soldiers. And farmers made huge changes in response. Many got rid of their other crops and animals to focus exclusively on dairy. But when the war ended, demand dried up, and the country was left with a whole bunch of milk it didn't need. At this point, farmers and milk processors had invested way too much time and energy to shift away from large-scale year-round milk production. So instead of making less milk, they convinced people to drink more. Milk education campaigns in public schools encouraged students to drink 4 glasses a day.
So much milk.
And milk producers got a boost from legislation that created the National School Lunch Program in 1946. Those meals were required to have a glass of whole milk. Even with all this promotion, the U.S. still saw huge milk surpluses in the 1940s and 50s. So the federal government started buying up the extra milk. It sent some of it to schools, some of it to the military, and to other countries as food aid. But much of the surplus sat unused in vast underground storage caves. By the 1980s, the government was spending $2 billion a year buying up surplus milk. The Reagan administration, in its quest to cut government spending, put a stop to the buying program. And that did not sit well with dairy producers. They convinced Congress to change the rules so that they could create something called a dairy checkoff. Dairy farmers would pay into the checkoff with a mandatory fee. That fee would go towards advertising campaigns aimed at making people buy more milk. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture would approve all those campaigns. Those Got Milk ads are one example. The fees also pay for partnerships with restaurants like Domino's, Taco Bell, and Starbucks to develop dairy-heavy menu items like a pizza with 40% more cheese. All this means that the USDA, the same federal agency that writes our dietary guidelines, is also in charge of a multi-million-dollar ad campaign to try to get us to eat a cheese pizza where one piece has 2/3 of the day's maximum recommended amount of saturated fat. And who eats just one piece? So if we know that milk isn't necessary, then why not change the recommendation? Instead of milk with every meal, why not tell people to drink water?
I think it's impossible at this point in time because the political forces would not allow for the dietary recommendations to say anything about limiting red meat or dairy consumption.
The dairy industry gives millions to politicians who protect their interest whenever the nutrition guidelines come up for review every 5 years.
How do we continue to make sure students have access to appealing and nutritious dairy products?
What can we do to remove policies that are hindering milk consumption or promote policies that could enhance milk consumption?
Milk and other dairy products can be part of a healthy diet, but the idea that they're essential, that's just marketing. And it's not like there's broccoli trade groups giving money to politicians and running multi-million-dollar ad campaigns. If there were, our dinner tables might look a little different.
So an interesting thing I came across, let me open up this tab here, in relation to the Got Milk ad campaign. It is on the Institute for Justice. Let me see how big that is. Okay, that's pretty big. Let me make it and see if I can just zoom in a little bit better. Okay, the Got Milk ad campaign. Got free speech, it says. Milk producers who are forced to pay for those ubiquitous Got Milk ads asked the federal courts got free speech. Unfortunately, after a victory in the lower appellate court, the Supreme Court answered that they don't. Although just about everyone has seen the Got Milk ads on television and in print, most people do not know that under the federal dairy promotion program, dairy farmers are forced to pay for them. For traditional dairy farmers, Joseph and Brenda Cochran from Westfield, PA, the assessments added up to a hefty $4,000 a year from their thin operating budget for advertisements that obscure the distinctions between the Cochrans' traditional farmed milk and the milk of large-scale producers. Fed up with this violation of their rights, the Cochrans challenged the law in court. Represented for the Institute for Justice, they successfully argued to the U.S. Third Circuit Court of Appeals that this form of government-compelled speech violated their First Amendment right to refrain from paying for speech with which they disagreed. The Third Circuit agreed, and in February of 2004, ruled the law unconstitutional. Unfortunately, in 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in a related case that compelled speech programs, like the dairy program, amounted to government speech. This means that the government can force the Cochrans and other farmers to pay for ads that allegedly benefit the whole of society. So farmers were forced to pay for these Got Milk ads, regardless if they wanted to or not, like they had to pay for them. So the whole thing's kind of dirty and crummy and makes you kind of feel dirty when you think about this whole kind of thing in a, looking at it as a whole. But yeah, I wanted to end with that. I'm sure there might be some more cases, and people that were quite frustrated by it, smaller farmers and whatnot, because the larger farmers are okay, they have enough money and things like that. But I'm sure smaller farmers, it does hurt their bottom line and money and things like that. Yeah, but I thought that was interesting. So with that, I know this is a shorter one, which was my intention, because when I go live, I just like to talk with everybody. And before I know it, I'm in a 4 or 5 hour long stream. And like I said, allergies acting up, and I've just been really tired this week, taking long naps, sleeping in really late, and staying up too late. And yeah, my whole circadian rhythm's just all thrown off, and it gets dark so early, and with my medicines, and just been having a lot of sleep issues and body pains and aches and whatever. But yeah, check out, I'll have my link tree. I'll post it, make sure I do in the show notes for this. And I'm going to just edit in my intro and outro to this. And I'll see everybody for the next, I'll do a live, I'll have a live next. I just got to figure out what I'm going to do. And also look for, I'm going to be let me get this off the screen first. Make sure, let me flip, hold on. Let me flip this so there we go. I'm finishing reading Noelle's book. I'm almost done. I'll make sure I link that too. I think it comes out around January 6th, the release date is, but you can pre-order. I'll make sure I put that in. I'm almost done with this. I'm going to try to finish reading it tonight so I can get the reviews out. I'm going to be making a short video about it too. A review not only in print. And yeah, that's all I have planned. So I'm going to get this out for everybody. And thank you for all my subscribers who have stuck with me, all my new ones. And I hope you continue to follow me, liking my comments, sharing what you might want to look for in the future. And I appreciate all you guys. I will talk to you later and see you on the next live. Stay tuned for the next episode.
We're going to have to be smart. We're going to have to be strategic. We're going to have to be aggressive.
I'm an alpha guy.
I'll flip a table every time you aren't getting by.
Let's go. Just push.
It's all psychological warfare. We know what they are doing.
For Trump.
If shit goes wrong, like I will literally have to leave the country.
Stop that.
I'll land my initial plane.
Okay, high five. This isn't the hi-fi show.
Good night. Nighty night.